Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Mind Body Musings podcast. This is your host, Madelyn Moon, and we are here today with someone I dearly love. I have been following his work ever since I discovered it, Richard Rudd, who is the founder, creator, author of The Gene Keys, but also so much more than that. He is a poet, he is a mystic, he is a bard, he is a traveler of lands, and everything he says feels like this exquisite diamond jewel treasure chest. Truly, that's what it feels like to me deep in my body. Everything is just exquisite. So, today we're going to be talking about a very special aspect of his creation of what he has been sharing and teaching over the past many years of the gene keys, and it's called the Venus sequence. And we'll get all into that today. But before we do that, welcome back to the podcast, Richard.
Thanks, Madeline. It's lovely to be here, and I'm very happy to be talking about this, one of my favorite subjects,
Mm.
love and relationships.
Me too. Oh my gosh. When you told me that this would probably be the part of the Gene Keys that got me the most excited, and then I spent a little time reading it and doing the golden path for this particular sequence. Yes, this is like, it's so beautiful because it fits in very well to the polarity work that I do in the feminine masculine and showing up as love. That's what the Venus sequence seems like it's all about, is how to be the love past the
Yeah,
wounding.
yeah, it is. It's shall I say what it is a little bit?
Let's do it.
Well, for those of you, I guess, who are new to me and Gene Keys, it's a profile that you can get online from genekeys.com, my website. And if you go and you get your free profile, and you'll see that that profile is a opens up a whole journey in your life, and that journey is a deep contemplative journey that kind of takes you into some of the deepest areas of your being. The first part is about your purpose. I talked about that last time.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part is about love and relationships. And the third part is about prosperity. And there's a reason for the ordering of those as well, because you need to kind of have a sense of what your core purpose is in order that you can then be in a healthy relationship, because that's your anchor. Your sense of who you are and your deep purpose is your anchor in every relationship. And if you don't have that, relationships are quite tricky because you're blown off balance, because you don't really have this grounding inside yourself. So that's why the Venus work, as I call it, it's connected to positions of planet Venus and Mars, and in our kind of profiles. It's not the same as astrology, but because it links into the I Ching, which then links into our DNA, and the kind of through the mathematics and the formulas of how the I Ching operates, which is the Chinese system behind it. It kind of gives us a set of, I guess, algorithms. They're the algorithms of our awakening. That's one of the things I call it. And that all sounds very maybe complicated, and um, but it actually the actual traveling of the path itself is very real, because you have these keys and these codes that relate to you specifically. And when you come into the Venus sequence, it's a sequence of codes that helps you unlock and understand your own patterns of challenges and difficulties around love, and around what I call the wounding around our hearts that we all carry. And so at the core of the Venus sequence is a kind of, it requires a courage of each person to go into it, because you're going to have to look at your own patterns of wounding. So the things that happen, you don't have to understand them. You don't even have to kind of be able to isolate them as events, for instance, in your childhood. If you can, that's fine. But many people can't, because sometimes these things happened so subtly and so early in our lives. And sometimes they're just held deeply in the cells of our body, particularly around our heart and our belly. And they're just cellular memories and ways in which we defended ourselves when we felt helpless, whether that was, it can be very subtle things sometimes that trigger them. So it's, as I said, it's not about knowing what it was that triggered it. It's just about knowing, what does the trigger feel like? How, in what circumstances is it fired off by another person or an event or a situation? And what is it, how do I respond? And then how can I disarm that pattern that doesn't do me any favors? Because when our heart closes, whether we, because we feel threatened, that's actually, as an adult, it's no longer needed anymore. And so the best situation is when we can keep our heart open to difficult situations. And that's what the Venus sequence teaches us, how to open our hearts and how to recognize when they're closing and how they close, and then begin to work at that with that. And it takes some time to begin to kind of reopen our responses to difficult situations, because difficult situations can be the smallest things, like a relationship, any relationship. It can have great promise, but then the other person says something and they probably didn't mean it, or whether they did or not, or they lost it for a moment, that just spoils the whole atmosphere. You know what I mean? Like, suddenly there's this kind of, you were in this loving space, and then that person says something or does something, and then the whole thing's just gone, shattered. And you're like, and there's a part of you that's closed off. And how do you get back from that? That's what the Venus sequence addresses. How do you get back from that? Yeah. So, yeah.
So for anyone that is new to the Gene Keys, I'm so glad you did that little coming back to the center of it. Listen to episode 315. That's the first one I had with Richard on. And when you pull up your chart, you'll see that there's 3 different colors. There's blue spheres, green spheres, and red spheres. We're talking about the red spheres, just so you know. Something that's coming up for me, and I get this quite a bit from my female listeners who are dating, and I'm curious how the Venus sequence relates to this question. Because we're in such a different day and age of loving and dating, like with all the dating apps and people being, so many people. I had a woman in my group program today say, oh, my biggest complaint with men is that everyone wants to be polyamorous. Where's the monogamous man? Like, there's a lot of different blocks that are even at the beginning of being in a relationship with somebody. So one question in particular I received from a woman was, I'm tired of wasting my time on the wrong men, on men who aren't ready for commitment, aren't ready to lead, aren't emotionally available, want to be polyamorous. What are your thoughts, or what's the Venus sequence's thoughts on wasting your time in dating, and how can you apply your Venus sequence, the theories of the Venus sequence, to even that process of finding your match?
Yeah, I think in a way the transmission or the wisdom of the Venus sequence and the gene keys as a whole kind of dispels a lot of myths around this, and some of them are perhaps a little bit I don't know if they're shocking, but they dispel some myths. And one myth is that there's a perfect kind of relationship and there's a perfect person. I think we all kind of know we'd like that to be true. And yet the reality is that all the different types of chemistry, and I in the Venus sequence, I've mapped the different types of chemistry, and that attracts us. So if you go into the Venus sequence, and you've done some of your own Venus sequence, haven't you? So you'll know some of these things, but what I haven't done is I've never shared that public. Well, I have shared it once or twice publicly, and I'm about to share it on my retreat that's coming up. And it's the different types of chemistry that attract us towards each other. So you can see that through this. I mean, we're going to create an app out of it eventually, probably next year. But you can see these 21 different types of chemistry, and what you see in that is some of them are based on harmony. Some of them are based on dissonance, which is where there isn't obvious harmony, but there's interest or excitement. Some of them are based on passion. Some of them are based on like a karmic kind of, oh my God, I've been waiting for you my whole life type feeling. But like, you're just so different from me. How can that possibly be? And how would we ever have a relationship? That kind of thing. Some of them are romantic in the sense of there's longing there and from within the chemistry. And that what's interesting here is it's not talking about the individuals, it's talking about the chemistry that comes when two people come together. So the first myth to dispel, I think, is that there's a good chemistry and there's a bad chemistry. There's just the chemistry that you have attracted. And there's a kind of, I've done a thing about this recently, it's coming out soon. There's a universal law called the law of unseen grace. I made this up, but I call it the law of unseen grace. Or some angel told me, maybe. And it's that we always get the exact relationship that we need, exactly the one that's in front of us, right? Even if it looks like a disaster. So that's the first thing, is there's no wasting time. No relationship is ever a waste of time, even if it ends in disaster, because the whole notion of behind the Venus sequence is that your relationships become your spiritual path in life. They become the path to your awakening. And so if you make that kind of commitment inside yourself, my relationships, whether I'm in one, whether I'm not in one, an intimate one, I have lots of others, friends, family, those are all relationships as well. All of those are part of my spiritual path. And especially the ones that I find difficult. Those are the best ones for my spiritual growth. If I put my kind of attention and my awareness on those, rather than kind of wishing that they weren't that way, whether it's your father, your mother-in-law, your child, your sister, brother, an old friend who betrayed you, or whatever it is, or you betrayed them, or whatever it is, those ones where the difficulty is, those are where the juice is. So I'm not saying you have to go and kind of find them, but I'm saying that they definitely deserve our attention. And so I'd say that at the beginning is like, everything is learning. Everything on this planet is learning. It's all for us to learn about our heart. And if our relationships can bring us into our heart, then actually, this is quite radical. If our heart truly, fully opens, let's imagine that your heart was to fully blossom, fully, like radiant, you wouldn't need any relationships, because you would be in relationship with everything and everyone at all times. That's a mystical thing I've said, but ultimately that's the great kind of prize, like to be interdependent with life rather than codependent, and not even independent, interdependent. So you're in a dialogue, you're merged with existence, this higher state of consciousness, of divine love, if you like, that many of us might dream of. And it may seem a faraway dream when we compare it to human love, but human love can lead us there. All human love, even kind of twisted human love, love that kind of just is ugly even, or that just seems painful, because that takes us into the reason why we're not feeling that greater love. So all types of relationship are leading us to that journey. That's why I think I've kind of said what I want to say there, but we can go deeper, but I'll just pause in case you want.
It's a stunning answer. It's a stunning answer. And I so agree with you. It's truly, to me, it's like a saving grace of having that kind of perspective on the rougher relationships. It's how we're not drinking that that poison of resentment, is by actually acknowledging, wow, that was a teacher. Wow, like,
Mm,
wow, my mother is such a teacher to me.
mm,
Wow, my very loud political father is such a teacher to me. Different
mm,
politics. Like these people that enter my life, and even when we look at the example I gave of these, the person we date that has a different type of relationship preference, or going on a dating app date that was really awkward.
mm,
All of that provides us a practice field. It's an opportunity to be the practice, be the embodiment of love, be the
mm,
embodiment of more breath when you really just want to fight, flight, or freeze.
mm,
They're such beautiful gifts and opportunities. So the Venus sequence, it's a sequence. Can you clarify that for us
mm.
on what that means exactly, on
Yeah.
go in order? What
Well,
is that?
yeah, I'll give you a little journey through it actually, because that'll be the best way to describe it. So it's a sequence because everything about our evolution operates in sequences, in stages, and the same is true of our mind and our heart. Everything we open in sequences, and our heart especially opens in a sequence. Like the heart is very delicate in some respects, very powerful, but it's very delicate, like a little flower, like a rose, those emblems that
Mm,
the poets speak of. And um, and so the heart likes to open in layers as it feels safer. It feels safe, and then another level of safety, and it opens a bit more, and another level of safety, and it opens a bit more. And soon it just starts to feel safe with everything, and then it begins to really blossom, and that perfume emanates. And so that's all about sequences and steps, and it also closes down in a sequence. So the understanding of the Venus sequences, there's nothing else as far as I know on this planet like the Venus sequence, because it describes each person's unique shutting down process, and therefore in reverse their opening up process. So the journey of the Venus sequence, and by the way, because we can talk at the end about the retreat I'm about to do, but it's a big journey. That's
mm,
why this retreat, it's an online retreat, is 6 months, like
mm,
just to go through those stages, because I want people to have enough time to integrate it into their life, whether you're in a relationship or you're not. But you'll go through you'll step into your sequences, and you'll step into the first one, which is called purpose, which I said, like, you have to have a sense of who you are really embodied before you can enter into a relationship in a healthy way at all.
mm,
Otherwise, you're just lost in the other person's energy. You're lost in the chemistry itself, and it can be really captivating. When you meet someone, you fall in love, or you have some lust or whatever it is, and there's this energy, and the chemistry just takes you. And if you don't have that anchor of your purpose, you're just entangled in that field. And although you may have some great experiences at the beginning, soon the entanglement will just snare you in a kind of massive confusion, because you've lost your base.
mm,
And that's very common anyway, even if you know your base, right? Because we can, and that's what relationship teaches us again and again, to come back to your base. This is me, that's you. These are the place where we meet, but I'm going to come back to me now. It's time for me to be with me. Because I feel like I need space for me, or I've been hurt, and it's, I need to look after me. And that's a really important stage in relationships as well. So that's the first
mm,
one, purpose. And then the second one's called attractor field. That's the second part of the sequence. And there are pathways between them as well. And I describe all this, and it's a beautiful journey to go on. The first pathway, I won't mention all the pathways, but the first one's called Dharma, which is a lovely word borrowed from, like, the Vedic cultures of India, and the Buddhists use it as well. And it's one of those difficult words to translate, but it means the teaching, in a way, the spiritual teaching of life that comes to you. So you attract, as I said, you attract through your attractor field. You have a field that attracts energy, attracts things towards you, and people towards you at specific times in specific ways. We all have that, right? And so it magnetizes certain people to you through a frequency. And that frequency, it's like a radio set. It can be set to a high frequency or a low frequency. And a lot of that is just deeply unconscious inside us. So if it's set to a low frequency, it draws in a low frequency pattern. So if you are holding, for example, an unconscious belief that I am not good enough, or I am not worthy of being loved at some level, if you have that, or, because of something that happened inside your childhood, for example, but that's deeply embedded in you, you will draw in a person who reflects that. They will also have that feeling inside them. I am not worthy enough. And you might meet them and think, oh, what a lovely person. And you have a nice experience and you get to know them. And then these patterns come up, like after a month or whatever. And then you realize, oh my goodness, I'm embroiled in this with this person who clearly doesn't love themselves. But then if you look deeply, you'll see actually it's a mirror of you. It's why people say relationships are always a mirror. There's something mirrored back to you for you to learn. On the contrary, on the other side, if you have a kind of heart that where you do feel really, this is why when you do this inner work on your own heart, you do attract in different kinds of people. So if you're feeling really wholesome inside yourself and you have good boundaries and all those things, you will draw in someone that also has good boundaries generally. Or you may have good boundaries and all those things, but you'll draw in someone that doesn't, to teach you, to reinforce for you that you do. Like, so, and sometimes that can be really empowering. It can be like, no, actually, I'm going to say no to what you're asking, and that can be really powerful for them and for you, wherever the relationship goes. And it could develop into a friendship from there. It could develop into, or it could just end. So every relationship, it's like, it's giving us, through that attractor field, it's giving us the teaching, the dharma that we need exactly so that we can polish the next little bit of the gem of our being. And then it goes on. And there's I won't go into all the pathways, but it goes to a series of three. It's deeper inside us now. It's a series of three places, which I call the IQ, the EQ, and the SQ. And they're a sort of triangle. And the IQ is our mental intelligence. The EQ is our emotional intelligence. And the SQ at the top and in the middle, in a way, is our spiritual intelligence, the intelligence of our soul, of our heart. And so what it says is that our heart and love itself is a balance or a harmonizing of yin yang forces. You can call those, if you're a psychoanalyst, you might call them animus and anima. If you're a shaman, you might call them a god and a goddess, that live inside you. You have lots of different ways, of understanding Mars and Venus, the inner male, the inner female inside us. You could say they're also like intellect and passion, and they're at war inside us in some way, because they're two sides of our personality, and they're the male and female, they're the man and woman. They can be combined in all kinds of ways inside us. So you can be a gay person, or you can be you can be all kinds of possibilities where those have like crossed over inside you. And it means that whenever you're meeting someone else, you're meeting their inner yin and yang as well. And how and plus on top of that, there's all, like women are wired differently from men, generally speaking, right? So generally speaking, and I have to say that really liberally, women are more emotionally wired than men who are more intellectually wired. I think we kind of know that, right? Of course, there are a lot of crossovers, and that's changing all the time. And we're learning to be the other side, so the men with the I won't say men, I'll say the masculine force, because that can also mean women, of intellect, can be incredibly strong and domineering, and can overpower the feminine force inside us, and vice versa. The kind of depth of feeling completely swamp the intellect.
Yes.
So you have this EQ, IQ inside us, and it's a nice term in a way, because we measure IQ. We've learned to measure it. We try and measure it. I don't think we're very good at it, actually, because I don't think it's just about kind of understanding, logic and how the brain works. It's more than that. But anyway, I won't get into that. And EQ as well, we're not so good at measuring that, but we know it has to do with empathy and listening and the ability to communicate and relate clearly and take responsibility for your own feelings. Those kind of things are like honing your EQ. So in your own Venus sequence, you get to see the triggers specifically that help you hone these parts of yourself and bring them into balance. And when you can bring them into balance inside yourself, you no longer have to manifest the battle outside yourself, because that's what's always happening in every relationship. It's just being projected out, the inner yin yang. So Venus sequence shows you that whole dynamic. It's beautiful to watch. It's really, because then you can, instead of it being a battle, you can turn it into a dance, and it can become something that you learn from, that you grow from. And that's when it blossoms into this top one called the SQ, which is our spiritual intelligence, which is really the soul of our being. That's when love begins to open and we begin to heal our heart through this balancing of the inner yin and yang. So all of that's in the Venus sequence. And I'll pause there before I go to the final stage, just in case you want to ask anything or we want to go off on a digression. I'm fine, because I'm talking theory.
Everything you just said was so well explained, and I love all the layers to it. I'm so thrilled to be doing the retreat because obviously there's so much to learn here. And I want to go slow. Like, I really enjoy taking my time and sipping
Yeah.
gene keys. So to be clear, when you say, I'm kind of looking between you and my chart as you talk, when you say the triggers, the triggers kind of meet each other, and then the triggers are yin and yang coming into equilibrium, into healthier states. Are you referring to the shadows or the actual events that happen in the relationship?
Yeah, well, both really, but specifically I'm referring to the shadows. And, as you'll know through doing your Venus sequence, you get a gene key, which is a code, an archetype, and then you get a line number as well. And this is part of our journey to understand there's 6 lines, and the Venus sequence is very strongly teaching about these lines. There's only 6 of them, and they're a bit like the octaves of a musical, of music. So inside us, we're very musical. So we have certain keys that we resonate in. So as you understand which line you have in your IQ, which line you have in your EQ, which line is in your SQ, it starts to begin to give you a sense. And that's how you know also those 21 types of chemistry that I mentioned. That's about combining those 6 lines in different ways, when you meet someone. So if you have a line 1, like I have a line 1 in my attractor field. Do you know what yours is?
In my attraction?
Yeah.
My attraction's line 5.
Okay. So a line 5 is a long way away from a line 1, because there's only 6 lines. And so that's a certain kind of chemistry that, I can give an example from someone I know who's in a relationship with a line 1 and a line 5. And it's a chemistry, I call it orbital chemistry. Right. So if you're with a line 1, it's a chemistry that kind of, when one person's energy is up, the other person's is down. When one person's, it's like those 2 people that like live in different rhythms. So like one person might be a night person, the other person's a morning person, and you will find between that 1 and that 5, you will find all these polarizations, and you're like, how the hell are we ever going to live together or get along? Or it's like, and so you have to kind of find a way. And I was sharing with this man, and he was talking about his wife and how difficult it was, and I said, look, it's orbital. It doesn't mean it's stuck. It's like it's moving all the time, like an orbit. So what you have to do is you have to kind of see when they come into it. There's a time when they're the same, like, you know what I mean? One's going that way, one's there in the middle. They're in the midline. That's where you meet. So you have to drop everything where you meet, and meet at those times. And so they're rare. So that's a relationship in which it's actually fairly rare that you really come into harmony together. And that can be on different levels. It might be you have a day in the month where just everything hums together, and you don't quite necessarily know when that day is going to be, but you might, after living together for a long time, or knowing each other, you might begin to adjust intuitively to those rhythms. But if your mind is trying to figure all that out, you'll go crazy. You'll be like, oh, you just drive me crazy. You're never, you'd always want the opposite. When I'm in the mood for going out, you want to stay in. And then it's like, and so that's an example, just an example of how these lines can like trigger each other or harmonize with each other. Depends on how we manage the love in the relationship. So there needs to be a lot of understanding. Once you understand it, it's like, oh, I don't have to change the other person. And that immediately means so much energy that goes into fighting or negativity drops away out of the relationship. Even when one person stops trying to change the other, then suddenly all the doors of that relationship open up. And I say this as well, like the Venus sequence, I say this a lot. I say it only takes one person to transform a relationship. So it doesn't, and a lot of people say, well, I'm doing the Venus sequence. Shouldn't my partner be doing it as well? And I say, no, just one. You can never force it on someone. It's like, if it's your calling and you have that courage, it's going to be your transformation. But your transformation can take place through your relationship, but it'll still be your transformation, but it will also transform the relationship. How, we don't know, but we know that more love is going to be coming out of you, right? And how the other person responds to that is not in our control. Some people may actually run away from that. Others may go, oh my God, what's happened to you? You're so like loving and forgiving and just easy suddenly, because all these things of, ideas of how it should be have begun to drop away.
Yeah.
So that's an example, another example of how the Venus sequence can help us through just understanding, how we are how we're meant to work. And you asked about polyamory, for example, and monogamy, as I said, all types of relationship are for learning about love. And I mean, I have to come clean. I'm for monogamy because that's what I am. So that's what I know most about, because I've been married for 20 years. And so I know that is the love that is the fiercest kind of love, actually. It's the fiercest kind of love because it puts you through the test more and more and more. It's like, I have to say, it's like, depends on the phase of life you're in, and because both can be amazing and in different ways, and both can be horrendous in different ways. And it's no reason to be stuck in a relationship either, because you can get, I know some of the most miserable people on this planet, the loneliest people on this planet are in relationships, but they're in relationships that are harmful, where they're locked out of, their heart is just completely closed and they don't know how to get out. And that's a terrible feeling. So I'm not saying it's, it's like the thing.
Right.
Whatever you find, is your way. And sure, when I was young, I was not monogamous. I tried all kinds of things. And then I met my wife and I kind of hung with that one and dug in. And it's like digging a well. If you dig in one place consistently, you'll eventually get to the water table. Whereas if you dig lots of shallow ones, you won't ever get down to the real juice. So, those are beautiful relationships if you can manage them. And again, Venus sequence really helps you because it helps you deal with your own wounds, and they will come up in a longer relationship. And you definitely have to deal with them. So yeah, I don't know how I got there, but I'll pause again.
So beautiful. I had all these little questions along the way, and then I kept having to drop them because we kept going to new places. So I'm gonna forget all the questions I was thinking.
No, bring them in now.
Well, the first thing I wanted to say when we were talking about the orbit, It reminded me of Benjamin Button. Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't actually, but
Oh
I've
my,
heard of it.
yeah. So
But it is he's a reversal of age, isn't it?
he starts out being like an old man, then dies as a
Yeah.
baby, but he falls in love and with a woman, and obviously she was a baby when he was a little man, and then they have this one blissful time in their lives where they're the same age.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
got goosebumps thinking about
Yeah.
it. Like the whole scene is them basically sleeping on a mattress, eating food, making love, and just taking that time to be in full pleasure together, and
Mm.
then it passes and
Mm.
then they move on, and it's just, oh, it's just
Mm.
so beautiful. And I love that, using the Venus sequence and knowing your particular flavor of wounding and shadow in the way that you, I listened to you on a doing a conversation with your friend on YouTube. You're saying something about like safe. We keep it in a safe, like keep our heart in a safe net or something like that, for safekeeping. And this process is about really reclaiming your own responsibility to be love, which I love this so much because it takes the focus off of the other. The same thing goes for polarity, of not waiting for your partner to be, quote, more masculine, and for you to just step into that energy you're craving instead of just like tapping your toe waiting for them to do it.
Mm.
So, bringing in a little bit of my own personal experiences here, because I think it's so timely with when I found this and I was making relationship choices. And my question for you, we talked a little bit about this in our last podcast episode, but through the lens of the Venus sequence. And this is a little bit about myself, but also just for all the women out there in relationships, all the men as well. Um, how do you know when your relationship is meant to be, and if you just keep digging in that well, digging and digging and digging, you're actually doing the relationship and love justice, and it will reach the bounty of treasures? Or you're like the example you gave earlier of the person who's in a monogamous relationship and really suffering. How do you know that line when you're just trying your hardest to make something work, but it's leading to more and more pain and darkness? And in that, maybe even what you're wanting to, the thing that you need in order to, you think you need, in order to feel safe and open and loving in a relationship and even be happy in a relationship, what if that's the deepest threat to your partner? I'm sure it often is, that our wounds attract each other. Um, and I've been in relationships before where my deepest craving, my deepest desire is to be loved and to love at the same time that I have my freedom. And freedom can mean many different things. Sometimes it just means support in my activities. Like I want my partner to support me in wanting to do my own stuff. That feels like a love language to me. Or I get off the phone with someone and there's no like questions about who it was or interrogation feelings. And my wound is that the more that happens, where I feel a little micromanaged and controlled, I get super triggered. And it has happened in my past relationships where I've attracted some people who have the greatest fear of being left or abandoned, or that I'll find someone better than them, so then they control.
Mm.
And so the more I have done the foot down of like, no, here's my boundary, I want freedom with love, I think, the more that's triggered the other person. So I can see already how so much potential is there for growth of digging and going deeper together or separate and apart. But what's that line between like keep going, or man, I'm suffering and this is painful and I don't want to do it anymore?
Mm. Well, I think I think our heart knows where that line is. So we really have got to find our heart. You know, that's and for me, like if you've lost touch with your heart, then you don't really know where that line is. You know, your mind may say this and that and the other, but it's you've got to come back. It's that place I said, that IQ, the EQ. You've got to come to that place called the SQ, which is your soul. It's literally the soul of your being. And it's that part of you that knows, either, yeah, I'm gonna learn, I'm gonna go deeper regardless of how this looks, or because I'm courageous and I feel up for it, and I'm learning and I'm growing even though it's difficult. Or it's the soul that just says, I can't do this anymore. As you just said, I actually can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to call it quits. I'm going to move on. But I'm going to move on graciously. I'm going to move on from a place of empowerment rather than a place of reaction, and do you know what I mean? And distrust. Yeah. I'm going to move on from, because ending a relationship graciously is a great art, really, to master. And the other person, they may not be able to, but you can.
Yeah.
You can. And it's and to be, it's what we owe to ourselves, that gentleness, that self-respect, and the respect to another, to speak, to learn, to have the courage to speak what's in your heart, to speak what's true for you. And also to learn the diplomacy of when to say that, and when not to say things. And that's that's an amazing set of skills also that are part of learning to love. It's part of the language of love, is learning what not to say as much as what to say. And particularly, when we're younger, we kind of just say everything. And then we learn over a period of time, like maybe there's some things I call it keeping it in the porch, which my relationship teacher, who was a wise man in his 80s now, taught me that. And he said, it's like, keep it in the porch. The porch is like that bit in the front of a house, so you take your boots off in there and then you come into the house. So it's like a holding place. And so if you think you've got something powerful and important to say, before you say it, you hold it for a bit in the porch, or if you've got something like you want to say, you hold it for a bit. You kind of have the power to just hold on to it. Hang on, it can be said later. It doesn't have to be said now. Have that self-discipline, and then see if it shifts inside you, and often it does. Or often you're like, oh, God, thank God I didn't say that, because it's changed inside me. And now I realize I'm going to be able to say it in a much gentler way and at a better time. So all of that is part of, I'm not quite answering your question, but I'm leading into these are the amazing arts that we learn in difficulties in our relationships. So even when things are hard, and it feels like this is wearing you down, it's incredibly valuable, because there's so many things you're learning this language of love, and those are things that you're going to take. If you finish this relationship one day, you're going to take them on inside you. But essentially what we're doing is we're learning to parent ourselves, inside ourselves. We're learning to take care of our own hearts, and we need to be very careful about taking care of the other, because we are there to, it's our kind of, when you love someone, you want to take care of them, but we also have to take care of ourselves. And many people can get lost in trying to rescue someone else, trying to do the therapy on them and help them. And that's actually a very slippery slope, and if you found out, many of us discovered that just is a disaster. And often you end up in this place where you're waiting for the other person to change or get better or get over themselves or get past a pattern. And in fact, we can't. It's not in our remit. We have to take care of ourselves. So sometimes what happens is, as we heal our hearts, we grow in love and the other person doesn't. And that's when because you're growing and the other person isn't. That's when and you might wait a bit and just see, because love is, like that. Love is like, well, I'll wait another 6 months or a year. It's not like you say that, but you do, because you love them, and you want this to kind of, you want to see, I'm feeling better about myself. Let's see if some of this good feeling rubs off. And if it doesn't, then you're growing at different speeds, and that's when the heart will probably say, okay, I think, I think I need to move on now. I think it's better for both of us. And it becomes clear. And that moment is I think for most of us, we come to, it's like a moment in time we just come to, and there's that certainty. But I think we have to be really careful is if we jump out before we're ready, before the heart has, if we jump from a place of like, I don't know, if we don't jump from a healthy place, if we don't leave from a healthy place inside us, then, we reattract that same pattern again in some way because we haven't healed it inside. That's what I was saying at the beginning of this call, like every relationship has its dharma, has its teaching, it brings us. And we have to listen to it's like an envelope you open up, it's like, here's a relationship, you open up the envelope, oh wow, what's in here? And in there are like a series of like lessons that you're going to have to learn. It's like, this is what the Venus sequence tells you. It's like, oh, well, here are your lessons. You're going to have to learn how to overcome intolerance. What are your, name one of your gene keys so we can play with it.
My SQ
Yeah.
is line 3, pleasure,
yeah,
adventure and understanding. The shadow is provocation.
Okay, so there you are.
Yeah.
So like one of the things you're going to really work with your heart, opening is like how to not be provoked.
So
and so you're going to draw in people that find all kinds of ways to provoke you.
My father, it's his favorite thing in the world. And I forget, like I went to Montana. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I went to Montana to visit him with my partner at the time. And we were all in the car for like 5 hours. And it was like Provoke Madelyn Marathon. And I forget that it's a game to him. And I get so activated. Yeah. And then I bring in, what I've learned to do is bring in humor. And then he's one of my greatest teachers of learning how to bring in humor when I am so mad.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so funny.
And it's not so funny when it's, kind of really personal, but in a fight with someone who, but so, I mean, that's going to be one of the ways in which you find that, that provocation is a great lesson, is a great learning throughout your whole life. It will be. And ultimately it can be, it can trigger an awakening inside you and a deeper, more liberating space, because it's.
What about the line, the line 3? Can you speak to how the line 3 and provocation or the
lines teach us a lot. So, the line 3, if you have a line 3, remember there's only 6, then, line 3s are the ones that kind of love change, right? And so that's, yours is a heart that will always love change and diversity and difference and travel and, all of that. So in a way, for your heart, one of the worst things would be like to be locked into like one kind of monotone way of being with one person that's always the same. And it sort of always just goes in that same direction. And, it's like you're going to need someone unpredictable, and that's dangerous as well. But it's also beautiful and it's provocative and it's like alive and it throws up constant learning, right? And that's what the line 3 loves. So it gets very bored very easily. Of like,
that's true.
Okay, and it wants a new horizon. So you have to work that into your relationship, and you may end up being with someone who's, pretty like different, very different. So you have to kind of like, let's say you end up with someone with a line 1 in their SQ, and they're very stable, right? And they like things the same, and their heart loves that, like the same. They can do the same thing every day for 50 years and they are in heaven. And you're like, how have I fallen in love with this person? Right? And then it's down to like, how do you manage that? So you have to be the one that says, okay, I'm going away for a few weeks. I'll see you. And he's like, okay, I'm going to be here doing the same thing. It's like, and then you go away and have your fun and you come back and you make it work. Or maybe you live in a different house. and so you just orchestrate it so that it works with your two different patterns. And the thing is, you have to, most of us find that really hard because we're being triggered all the time. And so we actually don't often get to that kind of almost plateau. It's a plateau that you can get to in a relationship with someone where you actually go, wow, okay, I'm in this, we're in this. Now we know we're very different in these areas. Let's figure it out. Let's actually figure out what works best. And that's so powerful when you can have those dialogues. When you grow into that maturity, you can have those dialogues and say, well, I like this, and well, I like this. Okay, so how are we going to do that? And you just figure it out. The hearts figure it out because it's the language of love. You're just sharing. A lot of the time it's practical stuff, and you kind of meet edges, and you're like, and it's a lot of things in our relationships about compromising, right? So, but I always say there's two kinds of compromise: inner compromise and outer compromise. And if you're in a relationship, you're going to make loads of outer compromises. That's just the way, it's the way. You're going to say, okay, I won't do this as much because I know it upsets you, or I won't do it when you're around, smoking or whatever it is. But I don't want to quit because I enjoy it too much or something. And so you come to these compromises with each other and you deal with them, right? But then inner compromise is something that's very dangerous to make. Like, so if you compromise, your freedom, that, or your, like that third line of your SQ that wants, that's about pleasure, that's about enjoyment of life, like if you compromise that, if you can't have that in some way, if you can't go and find that, because someone won't let you find that, then, or they're not comfortable, or they're jealous, or they're whatever, then that's very dangerous to make those inner compromises. But they, so we make outer ones, but we don't make inner ones because that's our truth, that we're following.
That's my purpose, by the way.
Which?
The bounteousness and compromise.
Oh, is it? So that actually is a key itself. Yeah, that's right. So that'll be another part of your teaching, in relationships. A lot of it's going to be like, where do I compromise? Where can I compromise? Where can't I compromise?
That's, you saying that is bringing a lot more context to that one for me. Is I said to a friend the other day, I said something on the phone and it hurt his feelings. And he told me that, and I said something like, well, first I did all the, I hear you, I see you, thank you for sharing with me. And then after that was like, and here's what I'm thinking. I just want to be myself. And so I was immediately there's something in there around the compromise of me. I feel that this is going to be a really powerful key for me to get clear on what is the inner and what is the outer, because some really are outers that may feel like a threat, and they're inners. Anytime that it feels like anyone is controlling me, my wounding gets triggered around it. Could my mommy wounds or whatever, family wounds of never having freedom. So actually learning as an adult woman how to separate between, it's not all inner, it's okay, it's not all inner. Like I've got to tell my body and myself, it's not all an inner compromise. Some really are outer compromises, and it doesn't mean that I'm now under the control of anybody else. So I can see how that's going to be really big for me in the Venus sequence and in my relationships, is coming to terms and coming to feel empowered in my own compromises.
And I think, especially for women, because a lot of women listening to this is like, you asked that question at the beginning about commitment from men, and that is a big issue for men, is commitment. And I love to work with more and more men on this issue of commitment, and I really challenge them.
Please.
But in a way, as a woman, you have a real power to let a man know that that's a place that you won't compromise. You will not compromise. If you don't feel that level of commitment from him, if it's a him, then that's it. you kind of just go, this is not going to work for me. I'm really sorry. I love you. It's not going to work for me. And a lot of women do make that compromise, and it ends in disaster. Because it's like, you know, every relationship needs to have its kind of sacred, you know, container. The heart is so, like I said, it's so delicate. You know, our wounding is delicate. Until we've healed it, it's delicate, and we need to take care of that. We're little children, really. We're wounded children living inside us. And so we kind of need to really have some of those firm self-parental boundaries. It's like, if you don't, you know, if you're not able, I understand. If you don't want to commit, I understand, but I want commitment from you. And if you're not able to give it, I'm off. And that's so powerful. Just that, like, see what that does to the man. That's the power right there. Then that man is like, if it is a man, you know, he is confronted with his own wound in a way that few people have kind of had that strength to kind of show him. You know, so it's really powerful. You never know what's going to happen when you hold on to one of those, you know, inner places and boundaries, and you just hold it for yourself. You never know what kind of transformation it might create. You might well find that person comes back to you and goes, okay, I hear you. I really want to be with you so much. I'm willing to really try, you know. And then, you know, like, great, he's going to try. Well, let's see how you do. But at least, like, he's made that commitment to, like, I'm going to try. That's an amazing result. So sometimes holding your ground is, well, it's really, really key. It's part of that purpose, you know, like knowing your purpose, knowing your ground. This is what my heart wants. This is, you know, I need these things for myself. And yeah, it's powerful. Anyway,
so
that's
powerful. It's so powerful. And the word that's coming up for me is conviction, and taking a stance on something that you believe in. It really takes you into, especially that example you just gave of, this is what I want. So many women in particular struggle with claiming what they want because they've been called crazy. And so they just second guess everything they want. Do I really want that? Or maybe I should be more enlightened and be polyamorous if everybody else is doing it. Or maybe I am moving too fast or being too emotional. And what life is asking, what love is asking from us, is to take our stance with love bravely, because that's such an act of love to the self, of being like, you know, honest, like, fuck what everyone else is judging to be too much or too crazy or too this. Like, I'm standing in my truth. This is how I feel.
and it may be the other way around. It may be that you are the one, you know, your truth is,
Totally.
I'm in the polyamorous, you know, camp. That's my truth. Like, I don't want this kind of other thing. Like, and this is where I need to go right now. And I'm going to explore it. And also, that's you know, if that's the heart that's singing out with that, then, you know, you just know where you are. You know where everyone knows where they stand. One of the foundations of like really good relationships is that level of inner honesty. You know, that we can just be that completely honest about what we really want for ourselves. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, so I know we're over the hour here.
Yeah.
Do you have time for 2 more questions?
Yeah.
They're both, you know, one's about the retreat I want to ask you about, and one is kind of random, but it's from my friend. She has an attraction sphere, and her partner's life's work sphere is the same. And they want to know, what does that mean for them if one's attraction sphere is the other's life's work sphere?
Oh, I see what you mean. So it's the same line, or it's the same gene?
It's the same gene key.
Yeah. So it's the same theme. So you often see that in, you know, when you're looking at these profiles, these gene key profiles, and you see like crossovers and patterns that come, and you just sort of have to figure out, you know, what that means for you. It definitely binds you together in some way, that this, you know, your what was it? Someone's attraction.
Yeah, my friend Nadia's attraction is the same as her partner's life's work. I think it's 57.
Yeah.
I believe it's 57.
So, you know, it's like you're getting to see that person's attracting in someone who will help him or her fulfill that life's work, and vice versa. There's a kind of, when we come together in chemistries, we also kind of borrow each other's, the field starts to kind of, we're more than just what we are on our own. You start to kind of become a morphed field. And that's why you need this sense of like separation, so that you can become that as well, rather than getting lost in each other. But you can almost borrow each other's gifts, and at the same time you can borrow each other's shadows, and that can also get, difficult. But you have to kind of get through all that and see, what those connections mean. It's a journey, and it'll go deeper. So I wouldn't want to put into words like some kind of neat little thing. Yes, it means this. I think, that couple are going to explore that, if they're going to explore that, and they're going to find out what that means for them. And it's obviously a strong connection when you see that, so you see one person mirroring another part of someone's inner being, then, it's brought you together. It's one of the things that's brought you together. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's so true. And they actually have talked about living in different homes. Like they like this space, and when they come together, it's explosive.
Yeah.
So the thing that I'm really understand and I'm gathering about the keys is truly, like you said in our last episode together, it's a quest. It's a journey that you're taking, and it can be interpreted by each person individually, like what they think it means. Is there any, if you are looking at, like if I was to pull up my chart next to my dad's or next to a lover's, is there any spheres in particular that we can look at to be like, oh, anything like that? You know what I'm saying? Like, because it is so massive. Is there like one or two different places to see how something matches up or doesn't match up?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same question we kind of began with in a way, which is, is there something I can, I mean, it's fun, right? You can look and you can see, well, there's things here. And, but if you can always look, and even if it looks like nothing matches up, you're like, oh, wow, nothing here seems to like match up on paper. But then the two people together, there's electricity. And you're like, well, what the hell is, and it's actually the dissonance that's exciting. It's like that there isn't an obvious match is why you draw that person in. And I call that adventurous chemistry. That's the name I give to those different types. Adventurous chemistry, because those relationships come into our lives at different times, and they take us on an adventure. And we may not stay with that person for very long, or it could be that we manage that over the course of our lives. And it wouldn't be an easy one. I'd say that. It's like, it would be, but then none of them are that easy. Like even the ones that look really harmonious, the ones that are the easiest are the ones when you have the same, right? So it's like the lines are the same. So there's a line 1 with a line 1, right? And you see these people out on the streets, and they're like in their 80s, and they're holding hands still, and you look at them and you're like, oh, why can't I have that? And yet that, if it's a line 1 and a line 1, is actually quite boring, but it's beautiful, but it's maybe not what you want. And maybe that person had lots of adventurous chemistries, and then they finally settled on that one, where it's just two peas in a pod, and it's like, oh, this is so nice after all those other ones, and or however their life shaped out. So we get different ones at different times in our life, and they all have these different flavors. So I would just be very cautious about trying to kind of, I actually won't go there. I was like, I'm not going to say, because even if the one on paper that looks best is the romantic one, because it's a resonance across octaves. So someone has like the note G in this octave, and the other person has note G in this octave. It's like a line 1 and a line 4. They have resonances, and 2 and 5 and 3 and 6. Those are like harmonics. They're beautiful. And so and what's interesting, when you look at all the chemistries, 21 different types of chemistry, there's only 3 of those, right? So actually true romance is rare. right? Which is why we kind of know that. We're like, well, I want that one. I want romance. Why can't I have romance? But you don't find it. Statistically, it's rarer. There's loads of the adventurous ones, when you look at all the lines, you're like, well, there's much more of those. So they are more likely to have relationships that don't have that. And then when you do find one that has that, oh, la, 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 you're like, oh my God, this feels so good. And man, it's hard to keep that relationship going because the romantic ones thrive on separation. They
Is that a
thrive on
line?
longing.
Is that a certain line?
Well, it's 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 2 and 5, 3 and
Gotcha.
6. So it's combinations.
Gotcha.
So but they thrive on longing. So you're better off not living together. You're better, even though you long to, so you're better off. But if you come too familiar, all that energy just dissipates, and you're like, this is flat. It's what I saw in you. Where has it gone? So you have to, like, even those relationships, you have to keep the distance. You have to. It's like we're playing music with each other, and we have to kind of learn the way of the chemistry. So this is what Venus sequence teaches. Like, it teaches, here's the way of your chemistry. Figure out how to make it work, and anything goes. Like, but you have to, first of all, you really have to do the wound work, because otherwise you got no base to overcome your own inner wounding. So you can't really love anyway. So that's the primary work of the Venus sequence. That's actually the bit I'm only interested in. I use the chemistry thing just to get people in because they're interested.
Yeah.
There you are. I've given away my secret. But the real work, honestly, it's healing the heart, with gentleness towards ourselves. And then it doesn't matter if you had any kind of chemistry. It doesn't matter what it is. You will thrive in it because your heart will just be like, I love the diversity. It's like, I just love this person. They've come into my life. I don't know why I love them. I love them. I can work around anything. That's what the heart really, that's what the unconditional love says. I can work around anything. My dad, you want to say what you want? Say what you want. I love it. It drives me crazy. I like completely disagree with you. But man, I love it when you do that. It's actually his way of loving you.
Yes.
And if your heart starts to kind of get that and your mind moves a little bit into the background, you'll be like, oh, Dad, it's ecstasy when you say those things. that'll like stop him in his tracks.
That would. Absolutely. Oh my God.
Yeah. It's love is just something.
Oh, so beautiful. It makes me breathe deeper even hearing that. How liberated I can feel in my dad's presence.
Yeah, totally.
So
can I just maybe talk 5 minutes about this retreat?
Yes, I was just about to say that. Yes, go for it.
What do you want to know?
Well, I was going to say that I have been looking forward to this for 4 months since I heard about the divine, the deep dive. Sorry, I have something called the divine deep dive round that I do in the podcast sometimes.
Oh, cool.
But it might as well be the divine Venus sequence deep dive round. So yes, please tell us about it and how long it's going to be and how much time every week maybe.
Yeah. I know it sounds a lot, 6 months, but if you think about it, like, I don't know what's going to happen in the world over the next 6 months, but I know that I want to be working on love, and I think that's a pretty good commitment to make. And working on self-love is really what it's about. And if you're in a relationship or if you're not in a relationship, that's the deepest work we can do in our whole life. And if you are in a relationship, it will probably shift the relationship in some way as well. And if you're not, who knows, what it might bring to you. We call it a virtual retreat because it has if you're listening to this and you haven't done one of these with us before at Gene Keys, they have a rhythm that's weekly. So every week there's a theme, and then the next week there's another theme, and it just moves, and it's very gentle. It moves in the background of your life. The commitment level is like, I think we said like it's around 2 hours a week is kind of, if you break it down, it could be like lots of 20-minute sessions where you're watching something, you're listening to something, it's pleasant as well. It's not like you're kind of a chore. It's not like you're listening to like a really nice meditation, or you're reading up on your gene key that relates to your EQ, so it's like, okay, and then you're contemplating that, and maybe you're listening an audio on that one, and then you're reading the bit in the book about that line to help you understand your line, and then you're asked to go and watch that in your life. So it's like, it's not like boring, it's like really engaging, because it's reflecting you now in your life. That's the beauty of these retreats, is that they take place in our life, whatever you're doing, whoever you're interacting with. This is going to start changing subtly all those interactions, I would say, because you're going to be operating out of a higher frequency in your heart. So the language you use may begin to change a bit. The way you respond to people may begin to change. Or small steps over a period of time. That's why it needs time, because it's a lot to take in. As you've probably heard from today, I'm talking a lot, right? There's a lot, and I wanted to share as much as I could in this hour or so, just so people have an idea of how deep this goes. And there's two of us teaching it, myself and Tamaya Lawson, so we're a man and woman teaching it, and we'll give our different perspectives. And she's a very wise, beautiful kind of crazy Scottish wise woman, who has so much love in her.
Yes.
And then we also have a whole lot of really amazing hosts who will be helping throughout the process. So you're going to be put in a virtual village of around 300 people. And those will be the people you can connect with online through forums and talk to. And there's a cafe as well, so you can drop in, meet people, like an online 24-hour cafe. So you can come in, just kind of chat. I'm in this part of my sequence. I'm at line 4 and here, and you're like, oh yeah. So there's ways of connecting, but there's also, it's more about like the rhythm of each month as it passes, and our contemplation moves deeper into the sequence, into our own sequence, and we're exploring deeper layers. And then we also have Q&A sessions in each month, where people will have a lot of the same questions, actually. Mm-hmm. And so we find, Tamaya and I, that when we answer, like, let's say 10 questions really well, we've answered probably most of the questions that people have. And if they're technical, they get answered by, technical people. But it's a great system. It works really well. It's a global group. You kind of meet people, and you in 1 week in each month, we have what are called community calls, where we come together as a big group in a time zone, that works for us. And then we get put into this is with the whole group. You get put into a group with maybe 3 others or 4 others, and you share where you're at in your process, and you will be very deeply listened to by those other people. And that's an incredibly empowering experience, because you start to hear how the wisdom of the sequence is impacting others. And the synchronicity of who you end up in a room with is always just gold, because it's not controlled by us. It's just the randomness of life throwing you into exactly your tractor field, putting you with those people to hear that story at that time and meet that person for a specific reason that resonates. So I find those really magical. So, and then we have these beautiful musical meditations. There's a lot of secrets coming in this one as well. There's a lot of new transmissions I'm going to be sharing. Obviously it follows the course of a self-study course, the Venus sequence. So it has these stages and steps already built in. So if you've already done the Venus sequence, then if you do the retreat, you don't have to pay again for your Venus sequence. You've already got that, right? Self-study, but then you're just doing the dive part in company, but you're going deeper into the sequence itself, probably than you ever have before, so that you really get to the bottom. And eventually we're coming down to like the core wound, which is this part of us where, we're beginning to kind of transform ancestral wounding patterns that aren't even ours. They're held in the collective. And so when you do that in a collective, in a group, it's really powerful. The whole experience of working with, it's probably going to be at least 1,000 people around the world from all different cultures. Then I think it's around 700 now. So I'm sure it will probably double that by the time we begin. That collective field is really powerful. It kind of enhances your experience. It quickens, it sharpens, it kind of just makes the whole thing so much more powerful because you're doing it as a collective, and you can feel that, and you feel over a period of time, you get to know people as well in your village, and in groups and stuff. So yeah, people make friends, really deep friends for life. So yeah, and as I said, I don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months, but we're on this heart-opening Mars Venus healing journey that probably will stay with us for the rest of our lives. So I hope that people want to come. I think we're offering you guys. I'm offering you a 10%. Anyone a 10% discount who comes through your link, right?
Yes, and the original price, it's for what you're giving. It's incredibly generous. I was surprised when I first saw that. And
I always do very overly generous prices.
So generous. So the original price is, how much was it?
$350.
$350
for 6 months. If you've got your Venus sequence already, it's, what is it? That's $150. Is that right?
Oh my God.
The Venus sequence is, no, $250.
Yeah.
Because the Venus sequence is $100. Yeah.
So freaking generous. It's so much that everyone will be receiving.
Well, I didn't want it to be a thing that stops people. And if you can't afford that, we also run a bursary scheme as well. So some people who really can't afford those prices, you can sign up to our bursary scheme on through the Venus portal on my website. You can go in through there.
Okay, great. So for everyone who is a listener of Mind Body Musings, you can get 10% off on joining the Divine Venus Deep Dive by going to maddymoon.com/Venus. And if you are not using that link, I highly suggest you use that link, maddymoon.com/Venus. But if you don't use that and you're just going to his website, make sure you get the 10% off by putting in the code. All right, here we go. Moon Venus 10 PC. And Moon is capitalized M, and Venus capitalized V. Moon Venus 10 PC. And I will have all of this in the show notes to this episode written down. You can just click the link for it. I will also put it in Instagram, all the different places. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this for months now. And during this time, when the pandemic first hit, I went really deep into these online communities, and then I needed a break because I went in so intensely into all the different, where all the groups can I go into. And now I've learned learn how to have even more intention in the groups that I put myself in online. And so this is one that I've been literally saving my energy from November to April, even though it hasn't even come yet. I've been energetically putting my focus on those months of like getting my sacred space inside, and actually like literally like getting my home in order, so that even if it's only 2 hours a week, I can dive in and I have the energy and the space for that. And I'm really excited to be held in a community and have that container. I think the container aspect is, for this type of work, it's so great. Like the way that you made the golden path, which has the activation sequence and the Venus sequence, is so wonderful. It's so simple. For me, I need that. I need really simple structures. And also, like we've been talking, it's so complex and there's so much to it. And knowing that this might be one of the last virtual ones that you lead, perhaps.
Well, I will keep doing stuff, but whether I do the Venus again is uncertain, because I've got more to move on with, and I hope to pass it on to others who are like really adept at working with it, so that I can go on with some of the other transmissions that I want to deal with. So yeah, it may be the last time I do it, but I always pop in, to the other ones anyway. But yeah, it could well be.
Yeah, so, that's just something to keep in mind. We only live once. We want to do the divine deep dive round when Richard is the one teaching.
Yeah, do it, and it will be amazing. It feels like I don't know that behind this is an energy of divine feminine. You know, that's why it's called the Venus sequence. So
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of that energy behind the retreat, in the retreat, woven through it. There's going to be a lot of beautiful music. There's going to be a lot of, some really cool things. Grace, the energy of grace moving behind. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So
So
if you want some
beautiful.
more grace in your life, then
Gene Key 22. I've been reading it.
come on, come
Grace,
on
grace,
board.
grace. So good. Ah, this is so beautiful, Richard. Thank you so much. And thank you for going 30 minutes over the hour.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just so
fine.
hard to stop when we're talking. It's so
I know.
juicy.
It's such a big subject, isn't it?
It is. So thank you again. I will have all the links, everyone, like I said, on the show notes for this. And please reach out. Let me know if you're joining. I know I'll probably see a few or a lot of mind body musingers in there. And please let us know what you thought about this episode in general. You can leave a comment, a question on the Instagram post for this, or by going to my website, maddiemoon.com. I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to sharing with you another episode next week.